Greetings. This is Yekaterina Nesterenko in the studio with you. Today we're talking about the following: the triumph of the Ukrainian defense forces in Donbas and hundreds of Russian soldiers surrounded. The Moscow region is burning like a torch, while a Russian Federation diplomat turns away so as not to see the bloody crimes committed by her army. Gerasimov revealed a secret map of military operations, and Ukraine is preparing powerful strikes deep into Russia. We'll cover all this in just a few seconds, but right now, please like this video and subscribe to the Ukraine Today channel so you don't get lost on YouTube. Well then, let's get started. Sunday morning in Russia began with a fire show. The Moscow suburbs were blazing like a torch. These are epic shots of the fire at the chemical plant in Balashikha. 4,000 square meters are in flames, and the Russians are helplessly throwing up their hands. Even helicopters can't save the situation. Black smoke covered the sky, visible all the way from Shcholkovo and Noginsk. The fire spread to a warehouse with auto chemicals. Enamels, paints, everything is burning with bright flames. Russians, maybe you can tell us in the comments what happened over there? Did someone smoke in the wrong place again? The Ukrainian armed forces are smashing the occupiers, while the Russian Ministry of Defense boasts that their special military operation is going according to plan. The Ukrainian General Staff states the Russian summer offensive has failed spectacularly. They haven't managed to capture a single major city. Spokesperson for the Dnipro group, Viktor Tregubov, also debunks Russian myths.
Despite very aggressive actions, and despite the fact that in some instances they managed to push back Ukrainian positions, there is no quick victory for the Russians. They failed to take the city of Pokrovsk. The city of Chasiv Yar was only captured in Putin's drunken fantasies. The same goes for the city of Toretsk. The fighting continues. For us, it's extremely difficult. For the Ukrainian side, it's extremely hard to hold back such a large horde. But despite all this, at this moment, we are proving to the whole world that Russia is neither a great military power nor any kind of military hegemon.
Near Dobropilya in Donetsk region, orcs surrounded and eliminated by Ukrainian armed forces. Trehubov also noted that near Pokrovsk, the enemy threw in 100,000 soldiers.
We already know about Dobropilya that those two pincers they tried to extend there have been cut off. There are still groups of these Russians left directly in the groves, but since they are cut off from the main supply and separated from the main force, it's really just a matter of time before they're finished there.
In the Kharkiv region, defense forces liberated the village of Myrn near Kupiansk, driving out the Russians and cutting off their control over the highway. But there is troubling news. The Russians have advanced in Zarekne, Donetsk region, and near Malinivka, Dnipropetrovsk region. And to top it off, Ukrainian drones also stirred things up at the Simferopol airport. It looks like 2 enemy helicopters have been destroyed, according to OSINT analysts, who have provided fresh satellite images showing traces of fires, along with comparison shots from August 22nd. We are waiting for official confirmation. How do you like that turn of events, Russians? As I mentioned earlier, everything in Russia is going according to plan. The chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, stated that Russian troops are continuing their offensive as part of the so-called special operation. But during the briefing, this so-called Putin military leader accidentally revealed a map of the combat operations, where grey zones were marked as already captured. In reality, however, the grey zone is territory that is not controlled by either side. Gerasimov is also threatening new strikes against Ukraine.
The tasks of the special military operation by the joint group of forces will continue with offensive actions. Today, we will clarify the objectives for the troop groupings in the various directions for the autumn period.
Now let's take a closer look at this point. Gerasimov claims that Russia will carry out massive strikes exclusively on military targets and the military-industrial complex. Really? Here's a 5-story building in the Darnitsky district of Kiev, destroyed by a Russian attack on August 28th. 25 people died under the rubble, including 4 children. Was that a military target? Russia is openly declaring through its actions they do not want peace. But you know, as they say, we're no fools either. The Ukrainian armed forces respond in the only language the orcs understand, the language of force. Our defenders have shown how they strike the enemy with Flamingo missiles. And Zelensky has already announced strikes deep into the Russian Federation. And while in Kyiv, they were burying 2-year-old Angelina, killed together with her mother by a Russian missile on August 28th, Russia continues to deny its crimes. At the UN Security Council, Putin's diplomat buried her face in her phone just to avoid seeing the truth about the murdered Ukrainian children. When Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko showed photos of the victims of the Russian attack, among whom was a 2-year-old girl, the Russian representative simply scrolled through her smartphone without looking up.
How can meaningful negotiations truly be held when Russia's horrific contribution is solely the innocent bodies of Ukrainian children tragically pulled from the devastated rubble? Look at these photos, and you'll understand everything. Russia has been found guilty of crimes against children for the 3rd year in a row. It is on the UN Secretary-General's list of shame in the report on children and armed conflict.
And now you tell me, how can we talk about peace with Russia when this is happening? Write in the comments what you think about this cynicism. Terrorist Putin is once again strutting down the red carpet, this time in China. The Russian dictator flew in for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit and the parade marking the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II to sign new deals and further strengthen the axis of evil between Moscow and Beijing. Meanwhile, in a downed Russian drone, Ukraine finds a recording from a Chinese factory where it was tested. This is yet another confirmation that the Russia-China alliance is growing stronger through the supply of weapons used to kill Ukrainians. On the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Indian Prime Minister Modi was also spotted shaking hands with Xi Jinping. And while they talk about the friendship between the elephant and the dragon, India is pumping Putin's oil, funding the war against Ukraine, disregarding Trump, Europe, and all of us. India plans to purchase even more of Putin's black gold in September. How is the Asian giant profiting from our blood? And what can Ukraine's partners do to stop the flow of Indian money into Russia's military budget? You will certainly find out all of the details right now.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
In our comprehensive report.
While across the ocean tariffs are being raised to a record 50%, India, it seems, has no intention of giving up Russian oil. Moreover, Indian refineries are already planning to increase their imports to 20% as early as September. That's up to an additional 300,000 barrels per day, according to Reuters.
Without India, it would be difficult for Russia to maintain its export levels, and this would reduce oil export revenues that finance the Kremlin's budget and Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine.
Today, India is the largest buyer of Russian oil. It supplies nearly 40% of the country's crude needs and accounts for about 1.5% of global deliveries. For Moscow, this is a lifeline. For the US, it's a challenge that undermines the strategy of sanctions pressure.
During the war, India significantly increased the share of Russian oil in its overall import structure, raising it by almost 10 times, and according to some estimates, even a bit more than 10 times. And now let's see how Trump will act with India.
America sees this as a direct threat. Finance Minister Scott Bessent openly stated, "New Delhi's profits from trade with Moscow during the war in Ukraine are unacceptable." And Donald Trump, once again relying on tough rhetoric, threatened that if the purchases continue, the tariffs will not be 50, but even higher. Tariffs are already the highest in Asia.
India will have to choose between Russia and the opportunity to earn about $100 billion, or say $50 billion from Russia. But under such circumstances, it would essentially kill all of its exports to the United States, which amount to around $300 billion. Given that the Indian government has always been remarkably pragmatic in its approach, it is abundantly obvious that they will inevitably have to choose the United States and either significantly reduce or completely cease buying Russian oil, at the very least bringing its purchase volume down to a mere 5%. That is, essentially reducing it by a substantial factor of 10 compared to the current prevailing levels.
And this will deal, I'm not afraid to say it, a crushing blow to the Russian economy.
In annual terms, Russia would then lose, let's say, about $50 billion from India, which means a very serious loss for the Russian state budget, which is certainly not going through its best times. The budget will fall short by $20 to $25 billion. If we're talking again in annual terms, that's already a significant figure.
However, for now, Russian oil is going to India at a substantial discount, and domestic refineries are increasing their processing. Moreover, Ukraine's strikes on Russian plants have destroyed at least 70% of the aggressor country's capacity. Now Moscow is forced to send even more raw materials abroad. And for New Delhi, this is of course a window of opportunity.
Many people will lose their jobs almost immediately because the tariffs will affect labor-intensive industries, such as textiles, jewelry, and shrimp farming. This will also impact the stability of the currency, since the US accounts for 20% of our exports, and about half of the export industries will be affected. All the orders we received from the US have now been cancelled. Clients have asked us to suspend the fulfillment of previous orders and all production until the tariff situation is resolved.
Thus, Delhi has found itself in an extremely difficult dilemma. On one hand, there is cheap oil and strategic access to raw materials from Russia. On the other, the threat of losing the largest trading partner and collapsing the country's own export market. Trump made the choice simple: either do business with the US worth hundreds of billions or get cheap oil from Russia. For Moscow, the bet is obvious: to hold on to at least one major buyer while the sanctions noose tightens ever more. But if Delhi does end up siding with Washington, the Russian economy will lose tens of billions of dollars, along with the resources needed to continue the war against Ukraine.
Lithuania clearly understands that the Kremlin has no intention of stopping at Ukraine and is preparing new threats. That's why the Lithuanians are installing concrete dragon's teeth, powerful anti-tank barriers, along the borders with Russia and Belarus. And this is not a reaction to the Zapad 2025 exercises taking place in Belarus, but part of a large-scale plan for the Baltic defense line, as stated by the Lithuanian military. Meanwhile, Putin's propaganda machine is foaming at the mouth as it hypes up their leader's trip to see Xi Jinping. Russian patriots are breathlessly trumpeting Putin's visit to China for the Grand Parade and the SCO summit. For them, of course, this is an event of galactic proportions. So what else is the Russian propaganda box obsessed with these days? We'll break it down further in our report.
A remarkable revelation is taking place on Russian TV channels. It turns out the country is under strict censorship and soldiers are defending Russia on foreign soil. A careful analysis of propaganda news helps to make sense of these paradoxes. For example, in the center of Penza, the usual city noises, footsteps of passers-by, the hum of cars, the clang of trams, are now drowned out by an intrusive voice from loudspeakers. Every half hour, residents hear the same message.
And here's the absolute best part of all. You must not, under any circumstances, approach too closely to this area. If necessary, call 112. Wait for the signal indicating the end of the alert.
Take care of yourselves.
Take care of yourselves. A Russian messenger for millions of people across the country.
Make free high-quality calls.
However, it seems this is either a quirky background or a troubling sign that reality is increasingly starting to resemble a dystopia.
It is forbidden to post such materials on social networks or share them with the media.
And in the Kursk region, a deputy proposed introducing fines for stores that display signs on their doors and windows with the words open or sale. The main argument is that this allegedly violates the law on the protection of the Russian language.
First of all, I want to thank you for passing the law on the protection of the Russian language, because the Russian language is the state-forming language. I travel around the districts and see that it's still open, whether the place is open or closed or sale instead of, say, discount and so on. That's exactly how it is. And I go in and say, haven't you heard about the law?
But the question arises, who is attacking the Russian language so fiercely that it needs to be protected even from two short English words?
I will certainly find someone who will willingly and readily go to the special military operation. He will undoubtedly and inevitably die. He will absolutely and certainly die, and I will definitely and assuredly get the substantial benefits.
This phrase, thrown out by a child in Russia, spread across social media, provoking both outrage and bitter reflection. For some, it's a joke about a profitable marriage. For others, it's a sad symbol of how the perception of the future and ways to achieve success are changing in the country. And on federal channels, they started talking about the country's main problem, catastrophic demographics. The tone of the report is predictable. As always, women are to blame, or more precisely, abortions.
We can significantly increase the population if we start, so to speak, taking the issue of abortions really seriously.
In Russia, according to various estimates, between 7 and 10 million abortion pills are sold each year. Each year.
This means that every year we are missing out on 5, 6, or even 7 million people.
The numbers sound terrifying. Supposedly, Russia loses 5 to 6 million people every year. But this is not interpreted as a health or quality of life issue, but rather as a shortage of consumers for the economy. And what's more revealing, future soldiers.
From an economic perspective, Here you have a market for goods, a consumer market, so to speak.
Or, if you prefer from a patriotic point of view, these are people who, so to speak, were born here.
For them, this would actually be their homeland.
Nothing special, and at the same time everything. In a country that officially claims to be fighting Nazism and even invaded the territory of another independent state for this reason, accusing it of Russophobia and xenophobia, one of the experts on a central TV channel made a sensational admission. He openly stated that he is a racist and a xenophobe.
You see, Ivan, the fundamental problem is that I am, in essence, a racist. Well, I am an outright and unapologetic racist. And by prevailing Western standards, I am indeed a xenophobe.
Amid heated discussions about politics and the consequences of the war, one pensioner voiced her dissatisfaction in a direct and rather harsh manner.
Why did you get us into this war, our Putin? So many people have died. They had to buy their own body armor and helmets because what they were issued could be punctured with a nail.
That's how they are. They need people, but in reality they don't care about anyone.
In her opinion, instead of caring for its own gene pool, Russia got involved in a conflict where its compatriots are dying, while new migrants are appearing on the domestic labor market, dragging along their own problems.
Ours! That's the Russian gene pool.
They brought in all these Kyrgyz people.
Why the hell do we need them here?
That's all. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you next time.